My basic background is in clinical psychology, but my area of specialization is in neuropsychology. And neuropsychologists are interested in understanding more about how brain structure and function works to create things that we think of as behavior or cognition or emotion, other things like that. One of the things I've been working on most recently is understanding memory function in individuals with breast cancer. And in that case, what I looked at was to see if a structure in the brain called the hippocampus, if there are any changes to that structure as a result of breast cancer treatments, either chemotherapy or radiation, or maybe just the stress of having breast cancer. We don't actually know the specific cause to the specific cause of damage to that structure. But if there is damage to that structure, maybe that might translate into why individuals with breast cancer experience memory problems, or maybe their attention's not as good. When you look at all of those factors, you start to get concerned about how an individual diagnosed with a life-threatening illness functions. They still have to go to work, they still have to have relationships with their friends and family, and if we can understand a little bit about the changes that are occurring to the brain, I feel at least that we can help individuals, we can come up with strategies to help them function a little better on a day-to-day basis. Cancer, to me, it's a disease that affects a large amount of people. It can have a more wider variety of effects, and I've seen it affect specific individuals that I've been concerned about. And so I guess for me, cancer is a way of sort of looking at other ways the brain functions. By studying cancer, I can have a better sense of how things like stress and emotion affect how the brain works as well. And that's kind of a part of brain function that's often overlooked. People certainly study memory function, language function, things like that, but to understand how mood disturbance, how something like depression affects your thinking skills, to me that's sort of fascinating because it's sort of more of an indirect way of looking at how the brain works, and yet it is something that affects people on a day-to-day basis. When we do something like a dissection lab in a class, I'm hoping what the students get out of that is that they see, if they see more closely how the brain looks, how the structures work together, that gives people a better sense of what is going on, how this translates into how we function day to day. The dissection lab that we're doing today, it's a biopsychology class, and the brains that we are looking at are actually sheep brains, which are somewhat similar to human brains. The reason that individuals like to actually dissect sheep brains is because they're larger, and so it's easier to see the structures that are on there. They're not as big as human brains, but they are large, and the structures are somewhat equivalent to what you see in human brains as well. Some of the basic work that neuropsychologists do is just, for example, doing testing with individuals. So if I'm interested in memory function, I do some memory tests with a patient. I tell you these 10 words and I ask you how well you can remember them over a certain amount of time. What I like to do is sort of mix up my research with other tools to understand brain function a little better. And that's where we have things like brain imaging, magnetic resonance imaging, for example, helps us sort of look into what's going on in the brain in other ways rather than just observing how people function. And I think putting all of that information together gives us a much better understanding of what's going on in the brain. I think it's important to say with this type of research that no one person could do it by themselves. You have lots of data coming in, you're working with doctors and patients. I collaborate with individuals over at the Southern Illinois University School of Medicine, and all of those collaborations mean that you need a lot of help with the work that you do. And students have been incredibly helpful with that. I'm hoping that by students doing dissections with brains in the lab or just the other things that they learn in class, they understand a little bit better about how important the brain is and how when something is damaged in the brain, what kind of profound changes that can have on any individual.